Hey guys, Maverick here. Welcome back to the channel. I was thinking I'd try something a little bit new today. I've been thinking a lot about how to develop a solo strategies video, because there's something extraordinarily rewarding about getting a win in solos in Warzone. Um, and so what I want to do is I want to take some time and I want to talk through kind of how I approach the game, some of my thought process and theories, and then I'll build future videos that kind of go really in depth. So this will just be a general approach to how I approach. So one of the things that was very difficult for me to understand or to get used to is an understanding that you can play a perfect game in Call of Duty Warzone and you'll still lose. That was really hard, and I think one of the things that, like I said, makes Warzone so rewarding to get a win is the understanding that to win you really had to play darn perfect to get everything accomplished. If you look at it from a numbers perspective, you have a 1 in 50 chance of winning the game, right? Could be 1 in 225, depending on who you ask. But we'll call it 1 in 50. That's only a 0.70% chance of winning the game. That's not very high. You look at a squads match, and in squads, you've got like a 6% chance of winning a game. So if you're here and you're watching this right now, you haven't got your first victory, just know that it's really hard to do. And we'll get you there. But don't beat yourself up if you implement some of the things that I'm talking about and it doesn't come immediately, because it takes some time on this. One of the barriers that I see a newer player to battle royale genre in general, but to this specific game, that really holds them back is they think when they're going to sit down and drop in and play some Warzone, they've got to start and play a certain way at the beginning, take it all the way through till the end of the game. It's one massive sequence. I never really looked at the game that way. And one of the things that's helped me excel is that I will break the game down into different sequences where I have a different set of objectives during each sequence. So when I look at the game, the very first sequence that I see is the initial drop all the way until the first circle closure. I call that the early game. And in the early game, what I'm really focused on is figuring out a way to build up my personal confidence. I think that the Battle Royale genre and Warzone is a game where if you start to feel like you're getting in a groove during a match, start playing with a little bit more confidence, you take better gunfights. So I want to try and build that up for myself. When I'm not confident and passive, I tend to put myself in bad situations. So one of the things that makes me confident is making sure I drop in an area where I know all of the loot spots. I drop in downtown. I like downtown because it fits my play style. I have a very tactical play style. And so when I'm downtown, I know that there are a lot of places that I can find a weapon, and there are a lot of ways that I can maneuver around to outposition people. Not everybody plays the game the way that I do. There are some people that are really good at medium to long range combat. And so for them, they need to be dropping into places that have a lot more open area. You know, the airport, section between the airport and dam. The backside of military bases. Places where if they can get an assault rifle, they can outshoot people. I've got other people that just love the run and gun. And for them, it's get me inside of the airport, get me inside a superstore, get me inside of storage. Because that location is really well suited for their playstyle. So if you're dropping in, don't drop at a place because a streamer. If you're really going for a victory, drop into a place that is conducive to your specific playstyle. The next thing that I'm focused on in the early game is all I'm working towards in the first circle is how do I get my loadout? I'll talk in a second about the concept of removing barriers to your focus or simplifying your decision making process. And I think one of the biggest barriers for me personally on my focus in a solo match is what weapons do I have? Right? Do I have to worry about what's on the ground? Do I have to pick this up? Do I need to switch that out? Is that better? I know that the best possible weapons for me to have in my hand are in my loadout. That's why I created them. So as soon as I get that, I don't have to worry about weapons the rest of the match. So I always like to try and have my loadout and have one that I bought and I dropped in before the first circle is closed. I really do that for two reasons. One, if I'm bringing in the loadout, I get to choose where I drop it, and so I don't have to run out to a common location where everybody else might be. More protective of my ability to do that exchange, because exchanging for your loadout takes time. The second reason, though, is if I buy my first loadout, I can always go get the second loadout to change up perks. If I get killed in transition, I still have the loadout available to go use. I haven't lost both money and the loadout. So there's kind of a risk management element to it. The last thing that I'm focused on during the early game is I'm really focused on how do I gain information? And that means a lot of different things to different people, right? So your first inclination is probably gain information. What do you mean, like taking a bounty? You know where a guy's at. Sure, that's true. Doing a recon, you know where the circle's going. Also true. I will routinely go, though, and trigger the contracts that are around me on the minimap so that I see them as floating icons. The second I see one disappear, I now know somebody's over there. I'll go and get high ground and I'll just listen. Where are the shots at? Do I hear a lot of shots? Is there not a lot going on in a certain area? That helps me plan out my rotations. So as I really approach the end of the first circle, at the end of the early game, I'm really trying to start gathering all the information I can so that when I step into the mid game and start rotating, I'm doing it in the best possible position that I can be in. Let's talk about what the mid game is. So to me, the mid game, that's where the first circle is closed all the way up until the gulag is closed. That's a significant portion of the match, right? That's what, 3-4 circle closures right there. The reason I treat that as the mid game is because that you're predominantly just rotating, and no matter what happens up to that point, my first death isn't finite, right? I'm always able to come back in and re-strategize with a gulag. So once that's removed from the equation, the way that I approach the game needs to change because the game's fundamentally changed, right? I don't have that extra life anymore. So for me, the mid game is a really kind of different sequence. In the mid game, I'm focused on completely different elements than what I was in the early game. By the time I've transitioned to the mid game, I've got my loadout, and what I start looking to do in the mid game is I start trying to figure out what type of transitions am I going to have to do. So I'm focused on rotations. I'm trying to start forecast where the future circles are going to go. Where's the final circle going to be? Where's the best place that I can go to position myself to win that type of fight? And the last piece I got written down right here is I focus on utility. That's what I meant. Utility. Utility can mean different things again to different people. Each game has kind of a different set of utility. I think ideally, the only time I'm going to visit buy boxes is to give myself some type of advantage. And that sounds like, oh, obviously, Maverick, why wouldn't you do that? I don't care if I've got money burning a hole in my pocket. I've played games where through the whole mid game I had $30,000 and I just wasn't doing anything. Once I get utility, and for me the utility is my self-revive and a single UAV, Once I have that in my pocket, I can approach the game in a different way. I can rotate with more freedom, firing off a UAV. I can pursue some fights a little bit more aggressively with self-revive when I'm in that medium to long range distance space. So some of those open field fights I get a little bit more confident with. The only times I go back to buy boxes after that point is when they are convenient or they are serving the purpose of a rotation or the purpose of me hunting, right? I might change how I play. It might be I just want to get a high kill game, so I'll go keep firing off UAVs. They each have a purpose, though. And so if you're playing and you just think, well, I should always go to buy boxes because I have money, that's not serving you well in solos. Again, you're alone here. No one's buying you back. So once you get utility, I think you got to start transitioning into focusing on some of the other areas. Forecasting piece, that's something that you'll get a feel for as you play more games. You'll get a feel for kind of how the circle will rotate and what's the general area that you want to be in. It's relatively safe whenever you see a circle to think about moving, I'd say, 2 inches in off the mini map when you see the screen, off the edge of the circle. You tend to put yourself in a higher probability area from there. So I always, if I'm going to rotate in, I don't like to hang out on the storm edge. I try and get in a little bit deeper into the circle to give myself more flexibility with the next rotation. As that continues to progress, we get to the point where the gulag closes. Now, when the gulag closes, I've got a really good understanding of what type of POI the final circle's going to be at. I know, looks like we're closing on a military base, or looks like we're closing on this big field. We're closing downtown, wherever it might be. When I see that, now I really need to be focused on positioning, trigger discipline, and angle control. That's what my whole end game is focused on. How do I make sure I'm in the optimal position? Do I have high ground? Do I have good cover? Wherever it might be for whatever the POI is. And that's different for each one. Am I executing trigger discipline? Trigger discipline is knowing what fights to take when. And that's not just, will I beat this guy? There are times when you might be thinking, I should shoot at this person. I've got a clean kill. And you realize that there's 3 people left. And the second you fire your weapon, everybody's going to know where you're at. So you're setting yourself up to get third party. So you've got to step beyond just the engagement and figure out if you're passing on any sort of informational advantage to anybody else that's still in the lobby. So trigger discipline is really, really key in the end game. And then the last piece is it's all angle control. I want to put myself in a position where I don't have to move into either my opponent's line of sight or I don't have to attack my opponent straight on. The best place you can be is holding an angle, and your opponent has to come across in the open to you. So how do you create that situation? All of my end games, that's all I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out what angles do I hold, where can I protect myself so that rather than having to cover 360 degrees, I only have to do 180. That makes a big difference for people. If my opponent's worried about every possible place that I could be looking around him, and I know that I've only got to cover half the map, I have less to think about. So let's talk about thinking. Talk about decision making when it comes to approaching the game. I'm kind of unique in the way that I approach the decision making process. I want to try and simplify my decision making as I extend deeper into the match. So when you start out, you've got a lot of things that you're worried about. You're focused on a lot of different elements, right? It's going to be, where did everybody else drop? Where's a weapon? Where's a weapon I'm comfortable with? How do I find some money? How do I get my loadout? Where's the next circle going to be? Oh God, how do I rotate across the ravine? There's all these other pieces that are kind of involved in the process of playing the game. What I ultimately want to do is by the time I get to the final circle or the in-game area, right? Once I get past the gulag closure, the only thing that I'm thinking about is where my gun is pointed and who's the next person that's going to come into my line of sight. I'm not worried about anything else. I don't have to loot. I'm comfortable with every other piece that I've got. It's who is where and how can I kill them. So I play the game to try and get all of the other focus barriers, it's kind of how I describe them, out of my way. How do I get those to where I'm not worried about them anymore? The more you simplify your decision making, the faster you'll be able to make decisions, and that's going to give you an advantage against opponents. So, how do you make decisions, and how do you get that advantage? And this is something that I think is more unique to my play style. Something I've talked about with my group of guys that I play with. I make every decision based off the concept of advantage and disadvantage. There are a couple of key areas that I focus on, right? So when it comes to an advantage or disadvantage, I can have a health advantage or be at a health disadvantage. I can have an informational advantage or be at an informational disadvantage. That is where I know something they don't know. More specifically, I know where they are. They don't know where I am. It could be I know where the circle's going. It could be I know that there's somebody in that building they have to rotate to. I know something they're not aware of. The next piece is going to be a mobility advantage. Anytime you hear me talk about a mobility advantage, what I'm predominantly referring to is the concept that that person, my opponent, has to move. I don't have to move. So you'll see this a lot when you hear people talk about gatekeeping. A very prime example of the idea of I have ultimate advantage, right? I'm in the zone. I don't have to go anywhere right now. And you have to come to me or you're getting gobbled up by the gas, right? So I immediately have an advantage there. The last piece, it would seem like it relates to the mobility advantage. I think it's a little bit different though, and that's why I kind of characterize it. It's a positional advantage. That could be high ground, that could be angle control, that could be when and how you take a fight. Some people that are barricaded into a house, I might be a better player than them, but they have such an advantage because of how I have to assault up the stairs or however I can get to them is such a big obstacle that I might just avoid the fight in general, right? So positional advantage is a little bit different than the movement advantage. And since you move so much in this game, I've got 85-90% of the time I'm moving in the game. I want to kind of separate those two pieces out. I only ever want to take a positive fight. And a positive fight is where I have more advantages than the opponent does. Simple fights are absolutely the best. Not cool. Can't throw them up on the YouTube channel, but they'll get you victories. So if you're new to the game and you're really focused on how do I secure my first solo victory, I think you need to introduce a couple of core concepts to the way you play. Don't change your fundamentals. Don't change your mechanics. Don't change your style. Change the way you think about the game and change the way you make decisions throughout the game. Focus on simplifying things and focus on removing barriers to your thought process so you can think quicker. I promise you, if you do that, you will drop victory after victory after victory. If you've enjoyed what I'm talking about, especially in kind of this different format from what the typical tutorial video is going to be like, please drop a like. I'm going to be making more videos where I dive into each concept in a real finite way, and I show specific clips and examples. This, I just really want to introduce you to the general theory of winning a solo match. I'll leave you guys with the final couple minutes of the gameplay you were watching, the top 10 scenario where you get to see me practice what I preach. Take care.
Enemy UAV overhead.
Target marked. Call for fire.
This is Striker 3-1. Good copy. Strike inbound. Impact, no joy. You're losing ground. Only 5 left.
Oh.
Gas is closing. Get to the new safe zone. Gas is closing in.
And that's a victory royale, baby.
Good work out there.